My dear friends, ever since my wife Maddie was pregnant with our child, Leo, which was about 2 years ago, and through that process, and then when Dot was born, and then just in the past year and a half, one question has been coming out of my mouth all the time. Is this supposed to happen? Maddie, are you supposed to be so nauseous and tired? Doctor, is this supposed to be taking this long? Doctor, is she supposed to look like this? And then just constantly, as God has grown, Maddie, she's supposed to be doing it. Is she supposed to be so rebellious? Is she supposed to be like this? And of course, the answer is always, yes, Sam, she's supposed to be like this. This is supposed to happen. Well, when it comes to the end times, the days before Jesus comes back, Jesus doesn't want you to be clueless like I am. He wants you to know what to expect. He wants you to know what is going to happen before he comes back. And so today, Jesus tells his disciples and us what he calls the birth pains, right? The pains and the things that are going to happen in this world that we should expect before he comes back. And so the 5 things that he tells us to expect. Number 1, expect false prophets. Number 2, expect human ugliness. Number 3, expect natural disaster. Number 4, expect religious persecution. And number 5, expect reformation. But number 1, expect false prophets. So the context of Mark chapter 13 with Jesus and his disciples, it's the same as it was last week, where Jesus is in Jerusalem, and this is the last week of Jesus' ministry, so he's going to go and be arrested and killed a few days later. And so they're in the temple and they walk out, and the disciples are looking at the magnificent giant stones that make up the walls of the temple. And they were huge, each of the stones used to build the temple in Jerusalem at that time, they each weighed about 4 tons, and they were covered with gold. And so it was a really thing that they were looking at, and they were marking at them. And then Jesus says, well, guys, in a few years, this temple is going to be destroyed so violently that not even one stone is left on the other. And the disciples say, well, if that's going to happen, well, then clearly the world is going to end because God must be ending the world if he's going to destroy his temple. That's horrible. And Jesus says, well, not quite. The world is going to continue for a little bit, even without the precious temple. So here's some things. Here's some things to maybe look for, watch out for, so that you know what to expect. Number 1, expect false prophets. Expect people to go in God's name and actually claim God's authority, claim to be on God's side, and yet lie, and then mislead many, many, many people. Well, okay, so where do we see that today? Well, I think some obvious examples would be, if you remember David Koresh. You remember Branch Davidians, if you maybe remember Sung Young Moon and the Moonies, or the Unification Church in South Korea, right? So those guys actually came and claimed to be the reincarnation of Jesus himself. Okay, that's pretty clear. Those are cults that I think most say, yeah, that's weird, that's off. But what about a Christian church? What about within Christianity? Is there anything like that? Well, let me read you some. This is the official teaching of one of the major Christian denominations in the world, and this comes from their official teaching. It says, this person enjoys freedom in the care of souls. So they're saying whoever this is in charge and has ultimate power and authority in the church. Well, that sounds like Jesus, right? When Jesus has the ultimate power and authority in the church, that makes sense. Well, actually, no. This comes from the Roman Catholic Catechism, and they're talking about the Pope. They're saying that the Pope was supreme, full, immediate, so power and the care of souls. And so you have a man that actually claims to have the authority and the power of Jesus himself. And well, how does he use that power? What does he? Well, this again is from the official teaching of the Roman Catholic Church. If anyone says that the sinner is justified by faith alone, meaning that nothing else is required to gain that grace, to gain the grace of God, and that it is not in any way necessary that that person do anything to prove that, let him be anathema, which means damned. And so think about this. They're saying that if anyone believes that you're saved, not by works, but by faith alone, believing in Jesus alone, and that you don't do anything to earn that, if anyone believes that, let that person be damned. Well, that's us. That's you and me. We believe that. Now, maybe that shocks you. Well, it's something you gotta know, right? Jesus said, people are gonna go out and teach false things. Well, listen to this. Well, I believe in the non-binary God whose pronouns are green. I believe in Jesus Christ, their child, who wore a fabulous tunic and had two dads. Well, no, that sounds like maybe just non-Christians mocking the Christian faith, right? No, actually, that was written by a Lutheran pastor, and it was said by Lutherans in a Lutheran church. Not Wells, not Narson. It was ELCA. Wow. Now, why do I tell you this? Do I want you to go and scream at your Catholic or ELCA friends or relatives? No. I mean, I think it's worth the conversation, at least, especially if you know them well. But the point is this. This is the kind of thing Jesus was talking about. The worst lies about Christianity, the most misleading, destructive things that Satan gets people to believe, they're going to come from the mouths of pastors that claim to be Christians. So don't be deceived. And don't be deceived when a lot of times those churches with those kinds of teachings are fuller and more populated, and those churches are bigger and nicer than ours. Many are going to be deceived. Jesus says, don't be deceived. Jesus said this would happen. That's part one. Part two. Expect human ugliness. In the beginning of the 1900s, philosophers and scientists and scholars predicted that in a little bit, in a few years, there would be no more war, there would be no more famine, there would be no more violence or oppression, because at that time, I thought human beings are advancing so rapidly, we're becoming so technologically advanced and scientifically advanced, and we're becoming so much smarter than our unsophisticated ancestors that eventually we're going to have a perfect society where everything is great. And they actually call one the war to end all wars. Because people at that time believed that after this war, humans are going to actually advance to the point where no, they're just not. How did that turn out? And actually, in the 20th century, the 1900s, more killed violently than any other century combined that we know. And you think about this too, right? Who were the people that did the most heinous crimes in the 1900s? Well, it was Nazi Germany, Soviet Russia. Were these people barbaric? Were these people just a bunch of fools that didn't know anything? No. Nazi Germany was the most scientifically advanced and philosophically advanced nation at that time. They were the best educated. And Soviet Russia was more scientifically advanced, just as much as America at that time. And so the point is this: human beings are not evolving. Human beings are not becoming nicer and more civilized. Maybe we have more technology, but we use that technology to kill. And it's not getting back to the 21st century. Actually, right now, there's 17 nations in the world right now that are actively at war, either with another nation or with itself. And again, those are just wars that have at least 1,000 casualties. There's a lot more things going on. But there's 17 nations right now in the world that have wars going on that's at least 1,000 casualties. And the one that you keep hearing about, which is Israel, that's actually toward the bottom of the list when it comes to the number of casualties. So what's the point? Human beings are not getting better. And Jesus warns us that you're going to hear wars and rumors of wars, and nations are going to rise up against nations, and they're going to be happy to slaughter 1,000 people just for a few miles of territory. Jesus says to expect this. Don't be deceived by that. Jesus says this is going to happen. That's part two. Part three, expect natural disasters. I probably don't have to convince you that. Yeah, there's a lot of natural disasters going around, the tornadoes and the earthquakes and the hurricanes that have ravaged our country. But he also says expect famine, expect starvation. Did you know that at this time there are 345 million people in the world right now that are on the brink of dying of starvation? A lot of it's because of violence, but a lot of it's just because the weather isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing. And Jesus says that in the same way that humans are devolving, in the same way that humans are becoming person, more unhinged. Creation itself, the world itself is doing the same thing. I think a lot of our young kind of realize that, especially when they're talking a lot about climate change. As a Christian, I would not deny the fact that, yeah, the weather's getting worse and things in nature are not going the right direction. And maybe some of it is the fault of human beings. I don't think that means that we should be all get electric cars. I don't think that means that we should discourage people from having children, that we all need to go protest. I'm not sure that really does that much good anyway. But I wouldn't disagree that nature is going the wrong direction, because this is what Jesus says to expect. That the world is devolving, the world is falling apart. And when Jesus says, don't be alone, don't be alone. You know why? Because Jesus says that actually this world is going to be destroyed, and the new world that he creates that's never going to decay, that's never going to be destroyed, that is what he's creating. That's what we have to look forward to. That's part 3. Part 4, Jesus says, expect religious persecution. That would have been the biggest punch that the disciples were hearing. Because, think about this. Jesus is all powerful. Jesus is all victorious, right? And at the end, Jesus is going to reign over the entire universe. And every single knee is going to bow, and every single tongue is going to, say that Jesus is Lord. But not right away. Jesus says that actually his disciples, his followers, are going to be heavily persecuted, publicly beaten, and killed because they speak the truth. And the craziest thing is the people that are going to do it, it's not going to be the riffraff of society, it's going to be the religious authorities, the religious leaders. And in history, this is just true. With the disciples, the first people that deeply persecuted the Christian church, it wasn't really the Romans at first. It was the Bible teachers, the Bible theologians, the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Those were the experts in the Bible at that time. And they tried everything they could to destroy the Christian church. They thought that they were doing God a favor. Maybe some of you remember the Apostle Paul, right? Paul, who wrote Romans, 1 Corinthians, Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, a ton of the New Testament. Remember, he was a Pharisee. He was a Pharisee. And he did everything in his power to try to wipe the Christian church. He thought that he was doing God a favor. But of course, he encounters Jesus and he changes, and then he becomes a Christian missionary. But then you notice that in each and every city that he went to, a lot of times it was his Jewish brothers and sisters who claimed to worship the same God that he did, that were trying to stone him to death and kill him. And you see this throughout the Christian church, history of the Christian church. A lot of times it was the other Christians or other people that claimed to be Christians that are heavily persecuting Christians. Think Martin Luther in the 1500s, right? The reason his life was in danger for most of his adult life was because of the Holy Roman Catholic Empire. And during that time, a lot of people that believed what he taught and taught that they are saved not by our works, but by Jesus' sacrifice on the cross alone. They were burned alive publicly by people that claimed to be Christians, that thought that they were doing God a favor. And the thing is, the same thing is happening today. I'll read this because I want to get the stats from it. But in 2023, almost 5,000 Christians were killed because they were Christians. In the world in 2023, almost 4,000 Christians were abducted and sold into slavery or worse because they were Christians. In 2023, nearly 15,000 churches throughout the world were either attacked or forcibly closed. In 2023, more than 295,000 Christians were forcibly displaced from their homes because of their faith. And you see this in the vast majority of this violence towards Christians, it's from their own people. It's from their friends. It's from people that are supposed to be friends. And it's a lot of times religious fanatics that think that they're doing their God. Now let me ask you this. Does that mean God is moving? Does that mean that God is somehow not in control? Does that mean that God is somehow just doesn't care about his people? No, actually, Jesus says that's the opposite. Right? Don't be deceived by it. Jesus says you should expect this. And then, part 5, expect reformation. You see, Satan is going to do everything that he can to destroy the truth. And yet, by his attempts, the truth is not only going to prevail, but the truth is actually going to spread. And this happened in the life of the disciples. Jesus says that you are going to be persecuted, and eventually you're going to be brought in front of the leaders of your cities and of your nations. And they're going to say, what is it about you that makes me think so much? Like, what do you? And Jesus then says, when that happens, don't worry about what you're going to say. Don't worry. Just say what you know. Just be honest, right? You were a sinner. You don't deserve anything from God. And yet Jesus, true God, willingly died in your place so that you could be absolutely forgiven and loved and accepted into God's kingdom. And now you have nothing to fear, not even death itself. And Jesus says that when you do that, when you just say what you know, the Holy Spirit is actually going to work that, and really, he's always going to use you as a right. It's not really you speaking; it's the Holy Spirit speaking through you. And when that happens, when people hear about that gospel message, good news about Jesus Christ and what He's done for you, their hearts are going to be reformed. Reformation. Their hearts are going to be reformed, and they're going to know and trust and believe in Jesus. And that way, Jesus' church is going to grow one by one. That's exactly what happened. Eusebius, the 4th century Christian historian, made the. You notice this, and it's a great quote. He says, "The blood is the seed for the church." As Christians were persecuted and killed, Christianity just continued to grow and grow and grow. We see this in Luther's Reformation as well. The reason we celebrate, Mark Luther and the Reformation, it's not because we worship him. Let me make that really clear. We don't worship him. He was not a perfect person. He had a lot of flaws. The reason we celebrate this is because God, through someone like him and those followers of him, through him, reformed the hearts of millions of people to know and love and trust in him alone. That is why we celebrate that. And that continues today through you. First of all, I'll say this. I know that maybe a lot of you are used to culture in a country that has respect for Christian teaching and values. I would maybe encourage you to be ready for that to not be the case anymore. I would encourage you to be ready that our country and our culture is going to grow less and less respectful and less tolerant of the things that the Bible teaches. Why do I say that? Because Jesus said it would happen. Jesus said, if you're going to be my follower, you should expect to be hated for the sake of the truth. It's going to happen. And honestly, the signs are there. You look closely, the signs are there in different spots in the country that tell me, you know what? It may be a matter of time before a church like ours has to go underground. That's okay. I'm not afraid of that, and neither should you. You shouldn't be afraid of it either. Because it's through that the church grows. And there's going to be moments. There's going to be moments when people notice something about you that are different. And they're going to ask, don't you see what's happening in the country? Don't you see we just got it? How are you? No. Well, why? That person just said that to you and you're just going to forgive them? Wow, that person, you're not just stop. And you're not hopeless. You're actually okay. What's different about you? That makes you different. And my friends, when that happens, don't worry about your mistake. Say what you know. Say what you've learned from the Word. I'm so. I don't deserve anything from God, and yet He willingly died for me and made me His friend, even though I was His enemy. And because He has done that for me, because I know what He has in store for me, I'm very okay. I'm okay. This world isn't mine. Jesus has something so much better in store for me, and that in the end, He's going to destroy this broken world, this broken culture, this broken society, and make something completely new. That is my hope. That is where I belong. So, the things right now that you see in the world, because there's a lot of bad things, don't be deceived, and don't be afraid, and don't be alarmed. They're birthing pains. That's really what they are. They're birthing pains. And if you've ever gave birth, or if you've ever seen someone give birth, you know that it's not fun. It's not pleasant. It's pretty painful. But in the end comes new life. And that's exactly what's happening now. A lot of pain, a lot of trouble, but in the end new life. Jesus has declared it. Therefore, it will happen. Amen.